Hey everybody, welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour. I'm your host, John the Bod, aka the Bod Father. And as always, I'm bringing you guys awesome interviews, and it is a great honor and privilege to have Mr. Reverend Benjamin Samedi. He is the vocalist and guitarist of Nightmare Sonata. They are from Greensboro, North Carolina. They bring some southern voodoo, death punk rock, and roll herpes to everything. And they've got a new album that's out right now called Carolina Voodoo. And I'm very, very impressed with this. Voodoo verse from the hearse stands out a lot to me on this album. It's just a great, great song with great breakdowns. Ben, how's it going, my friend?
It's going all right. I'm happy to be on the show.
What's impressed you the most about making Carolina Voodoo? What's caught your eye about it, if anything, man?
How long it took to finally get it done. It was definitely a labor of love. We started recording it around December 2014. Mm-hmm. And Rob, the bass player from American Murder, did the engineering and the producing for it. It was, everything from hard drives crashing to having to change platforms through the recording process, having to do overdubs, over and over and over again, trying to get it right. I wanted it to be the best record, that we put out. And interestingly enough, the idea initially had been that we were wanting to take a lot of the old stuff that eventually we just kind of compiled on Skeletons from the Closet, and we wanted to re-record it as a three-piece, quick, fast, and dirty, and just get it out and have all that old stuff be done. Mm-hmm. And somewhere in the process, the record ended up being over half of it new material. So 13 Hail Marys, Black Kisses, and Made of Steel were reworks, and then everything else was new stuff. And so instead of it being that, like another EP, ended up being a mostly original record with new takes on the old songs. And so because of the change in platforms and issues with hard drives, the every Sunday seemed like for a solid year, Rob would come up from Concord, and we would work, for hours upon hours trying to get this stuff right, trying to give it like a, kind of a organic sound, and like I said, just wanting it to be the best thing that we'd put out to date. So people seem to like it. You're never really done, when you're trying to create music with the mixing process, and that you'll always go back and listen to the record, whatever record it is that you put out, and I wish I had done this a little different, or I wish I had added that, or I wish that we'd tweaked the kick drum this way, or whatever. You're never finished. Sometimes it just comes to a point where you have to be willing to let it go and get the music out to the world. So far, so good. So there you go.
Now, did you guys do it yourself and record this album, or you mentioned Rob that he helped record this album? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, it was, a group effort there. So,
okay.
Decade Angel Production Studios, or Benjamin's Samedi's House of Voodoo, is my basement.
Okay.
So, he brought in stuff that American Murder uses. I'd asked him to help us record the album because I wanted a different perspective. Right. So all the stuff that is on Skeletons from the Closet and everything that is on Necrophile and my solo record, Funeral Parlor Blues, and all of the old EPs that are out of print that, that they are what make up Skeletons from the Closet. I'd done all that myself with no real outside influence. I'd bring the band in, they'd record their parts, and then it would just be me and my laptop and a pair of headphones working on getting stuff mixed. Well, something I'm really not good at is mixing live drums. I can create drum programs. At one point was very fluent in Fruity Loops. I'm good at mixing drums electronically. Mixing live drums, to me, is the hardest part of the recording process. You can direct line your cabinets into your recording platform and get no open air from microphones. You can use emulators from things like Line 6 and all of those, get an amazing, crazy dynamic sound, and all of the dirt from open mics is gone. Really, the only thing that you should have a whole lot of issue with is, and as long as you got a good studio mic with a good pop guard, you won't have those issues. Is the vocals. But with the drums, isolating drums is difficult. There's like bleed over from the hi-hats and everything else. And my drummer hits things really, really, really hard. He is notorious for how hard he hits his drums. He has to tune his drum skins down so that he doesn't put holes in his drum heads when he plays. So knowing that I had those obstacles ahead of me to record Carolina Voodoo, I asked Rob if he'd be willing to help out. And Rob is not only a friend of mine, but he's also a fan of the band and has been a fan of the band for years, since we started doing shows around the South together. And he was really excited to be a part of the project. So he did all the, hit all the buttons, did all the recording. If I was satisfied with it, the recording itself, the raw track itself, then good to go. If not, we'd delete it, do it again until we got the take that we wanted. And then the mixing process was a collaborative effort. So it was, Rob would take it home and mess with it and bring it back. And we'd sit there, for hours and hours watching that cursor go across the screen, trying to get the levels right and whatever not. And I'd say, well, I want this tweaked, or I want this a little different, or whatever it is. So that the actual mixing process was a collaborative effort. But because of Rob bringing in different level of expertise with recording acoustic drums, that's why Carolina Voodoo came out as well as it did. Necrophile, you definitely get that raw, garage punk feel. You get, like, Necrophile definitely brought out like that 80s Black Flag, Dead Kennedys, Misfits, like this is raw fucking punk vibe. Carolina Voodoo was, it's still not what I would call industry standard in terms of production value, but it was a lot closer to anything else we had done. And that was because of Rob. Like Rob gave it the polish that it has. And we learned a lot of lessons from the process of recording it. We're working on rehearsing the tracks for the next record right now. And probably, we'll do our fall tour this year. And probably when we come back from this year's fall tour, we'll start thinking about actually laying down tracks for the next record. And we'll take those lessons, and I think that the next record is going to be even better.
So as far as Nightmare Sonata goes, do you guys want to do the full-length route instead of the EP, or does it really matter to you guys? I know some like the EP route because of the people's, folks' attention span. They want stuff now. But what's your take? I'm
kind of over that.
Yeah.
And we... I started this project, and I'm the songwriter, and all the rights to the music belongs to me. I'm the only original band member. I founded Nightmare Sonata. I'm the only original guy. I started this way back in October 2004. Really, like summer, fall of 2004 is when we started rehearsing it. And then the first show was October 31st, 2004 on the dot. And then the first body of work was an EP. It was a 4-song EP called Graveyard Symphony. And all of those tracks, are on Skeletons from the Closet, and one incarnation or version of the other. And it seemed, to me, it seemed like that I just kept refining and reworking the same old stuff. And then the next EP came out, and Sex and the Cemetery was the next EP, like the very next year. And then more lineup changes, and I did horror demos 1 and 2, both of which were like little 3-song demos with some rework stuff from the prior 2 EPs, but with new songs that weren't on either of those. And that was all me. I did all the instrumentation for those 2 records. And they were like they were, I wouldn't even call them an EP. They were like more like singles. And more lineup changes, and then we worked on Postmortem Lullabies. And Postmortem Lullabies, was the first time that I allowed a degree of input from another individual, and I let someone else do the drum programming. And the thing was that, his way of putting a twist on the drums, in my opinion, was putting beats where they didn't belong. And I know that some people like avant-garde stuff. They find it to be challenging and interesting is the word that they may throw around. Mm-hmm. But that isn't the music that I make. Like, I make stuff that is easily digestible by the listener, works with, 4/4 time signatures, makes sense, easy to, rock and roll, loud, fast rock and roll. And so there were tracks from Postmortem Lullabies that when we went to decide what was going to be on Skeletons from the Closet and in what version of those songs, a lot of the Postmortem Lullaby versions didn't get used. So maybe three of the 6 tracks that were on Postmortem Lullabies was actually used. Mm. Because instead of a double bass beat, he'd want to put a triple bass beat. And you kind of feel like you were, if you're sitting there bobbing along, listening to the song, you kind of feel like you were tripping a little bit every time, like trying to walk along the sidewalk. Every time that triple bass beat would hit, it didn't make sense.
Well, sure, yeah.
So Postmortem Lullabies came out, and lineup changes, and then started working on Necrophile. So Necrophile was all original stuff. And it was the first time that I recorded with live drums. So I had like a live drummer come in. I wasn't doing all of the instrumentation. I was doing all the mixing and the producing, but it was definitely an experiment in me trying to figure out how I'm supposed to do it with like everything acoustic. And so we called Necrophile an EP, but it's LP length. It's over 30 minutes, and it's 7 tracks. I just kind of decided I was over it. I'm like, I'm over it. I'm going to take, and then Carolina Voodoo is the last time that reworked material will ever appear. And it was the minority of the record. Like over 70% of the record was original. I'm proud of the reworked material. I think that especially Made of Steel, I thought was came out really strong. And, we were, the thing about Made of Steel, that particular song, is that it was kind of how I worked through my grief of, with Peter Steele from Typo Negative's passing. And so it was important to me for that song to be on that record. But everything from henceforth, where the next one's going to be called Proud of My Sins, and it will be all original. 10 tracks, probably about 40, right now I'm kind of clocking it at around 45, 50 minutes. And it's going to be a mix of, straight ahead punk, but also things that are a little more metal tinged, and just the straight up loud, fast rock and roll as well. It's dynamic, full spectrum of influences. I think it's going to be solid.
Are there any songs off the Carolina Voodoo album that stand out more to you than any possibly?
Well, you mentioned Voodoo Verse from the Hearse.
Yep.
That one's probably my favorite one to play.
Yeah.
We just got done filming the music video for it. So the music video for that song is being edited as we speak. And that's going to be, and the music video is going to be probably the best music video we've ever put out. And I was real particular to get everything just right. I totally micromanaged the process this time to make sure that the vision came out, exactly how I saw it in my head. I had good people involved with shooting it. That song, Voodoo Verse from the Hearse, was very much like, I want to write a rock and roll song. I want to write an anthem that kind of talks about what we stand for. So order of business number 1, we are a band from the South. And a lot of bands that are from out of the way places seem to kind of lament and mourn the fact that they're not from New York City or LA or someplace like that. And they seem to think that if they were located in those towns, that it would be like Rocket Ride to overnight success.
Yeah.
Their town has a small scene. It's kind of shitty. They're used to, they're turning backflips if they draw 30 heads on a Saturday night, for a show. I have toured from coast to coast. I have played New York City. I have played Los Angeles. I've played Atlanta, Dallas, El Paso, Denver. I've played a lot of places. And so for any aspiring musicians that are out there listening to this, or like people that have been at it for a while that are frustrated, it is just as shitty in Los Angeles and in New York as it is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Yeah. It is no better. As a matter of fact, some of the problems that you think that you have at home, I guarantee you, are worse in other towns.
Guarantee. Yep, I agree
guarantee
with you.
It.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
And the only thing that is going to get you success is, one, you got to be good. The product that you're putting out has to outshine your competition in terms of maybe not the recording quality, but the craftsmanship of the songs themselves has to be outstanding. And your live performance has to be on point. If you're up there and you don't know what to say between songs, and we can't quite tell if you're tuning your guitars or if that's feedback from the song, or is that the song, or can't quite make out what you're mumbling into the microphone, if you can't interact with a crowd, a band that isn't as good in terms of musicianship, if they're better performers, they're going to outshine. So when you go and play, even if only 5 people show up, you better knock all 5 of those people off their feet every single time. And then it's just, it is a war of attrition. Bands are going to stand up and they're going to stand down. You have to be willing to weather the storm. So, Nightmare Sonata at this point, has been around for, as of October 31st of 2017, I will have had this show on the road for 13 years. Jeez. Lucky number 13.
Yeah.
And you are just now knocking on my door wanting an interview after 13 years.
Yep.
And it is nothing against you. It's just that it has taken that long for the black mold that is our rock and roll to start to catch hold in the musical foundation.
I actually found you guys on YouTube and doing some horror stuff because I was like, I want to get more back into horror stuff I support tremendously on this show. And,
awesome.
And I saw you guys and I listened to a verse from Hearst and I was like, holy shit, this is pretty good. And then started listening to more and more and I was like, these are really good songs, man. And I dig what you guys do. Honestly, it's really good.
Thank you so much. And it's people like you coming out of the woodwork are why we're still doing this after 13 years. And why we're going to continue to do it probably for another 13 more. And probably another 13 beyond that. Every time you kind of have a bad show and, nobody came or it didn't seem like anybody cared and didn't sell a damn, speck of merch. Every time one person will come up and say, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. And that one person, reaching that one person makes it seem worthwhile every single time. And, so those onesies and twosies of converted fans start to add up. All of a sudden, I find myself in a position where people seem to care about what I have to say about things. And which to me is still very strange because, for the longest time, I knew the repeat offenders that would show up to shows more than once voluntarily on their own and pay money for it every time. I knew all of them like on a first name basis,
right.
And then all of a sudden, people coming up to you, oh, I've seen you like 3 times. Wow. Where? I saw you this one time in Virginia, and I saw you this one time down in South Carolina, and we're sitting there in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, for this show. And, then you look back and you realize how far you've come, and, you have stature. And those are motivating things. And so, all the stuff that we're talking about, diligence and discipline and taking pride in your roots and where you're from, because we wouldn't play the songs that we do the way that we do if we came from Los Angeles or New York City. Right. We'd be doing something completely different because our life experience would not be what it is. I wanted that attitude to be reflected in Voodoo Verse from the Hearst. So what are some things we really love that are Southern things? voodoo grits, pecan pie, hot sauce,
Fried
Carolina barbecue, you know, Spanish moss, you know, hanging down from trees. And, you know, I talk about, you know, my favorite city being New Orleans and preferring Savannah to, you know, towns up north, which I won't name because, you know, nothing against those places. And I hope that I get to play all of those towns, but, you know, Savannah, you know, and I wanted, you know, talk about horror movies and, you know, like there was a part of it was inspired. I played a show in Charleston, South Carolina, and like these representatives from like a hearse motor club were there. And, you know, like hey, you got to come check our hearses out. And I went out there and posed with them for photos by their hearses. Like all of them have hearses. And so like that experience, you know, helped to create that song. So Voodoo Verse from the Hearse kind of became Nightmare Sonata's Rock and Roll All Night, you know, Nightmare Sonata's Blitzkrieg Bop. You know, this is what we're about, you know, vampires and all of these things. So that one, I think that was the one that I'm the most proud of. The song Carolina Voodoo is the title track is another one. Something that I always thought was cool, like listening to bands like Rancid.
Yeah.
Rancid integrates a lot of imagery from the parts of the San Francisco Bay Area where they're from into their music. So Rancid's music is very personal to the people that are from that area. Or like the band The Casualties has a lot of references to New York City in their music because that's where they're from. That people from New York City are going to get it. And unless you've been to New York City and really know New York City, you're not going to get it, you know? So, and that's cool. You know, it's cool to be proud of where you come from. So I'm like, well, we're a horror rock band from Guilford County, Greensboro, North Carolina. And we have Southern accents. Oh, man, when we played in New York City and I opened my mouth to talk, you should have seen their reaction. And, you know, we all like, we're really going to turn it up tonight, boys. How y'all doing tonight? Anybody got some pecan pie for me? You know, like just turning the Southern charm up, man. Terrific. So the song that, you know, Carolina Voodoo is also a tribute to the bands that are from around here. We have been fortunate to play with some really awesome bands from this area. And people ask me, they're like, well, what are you listening to? You know? And I have to honestly say that, like, other than the music that I grew up with, most of the stuff, like the CDs that are actually in the van that I listen to, are bands that I have played with, like, on the road, by and large.
Nice.
You know, so American Murder from Concord, North Carolina, is one of those bands. I love that band, and I love the people in it. J.D. Power and the Associates. An Acquired Taste, definitely a niche band. You know, they don't celebrate another year of being a band. They celebrate every year that they don't get a cease and desist letter from J.D. Power Associates. And they're that band that, like, the band wives and girlfriends hate that band, but band guys love that band. You know, they're another one. Mind Jack from Lexington, North Carolina, which is a really interesting sonic brew of, like, Black Flag and Suicidal Tendencies type punk blended with, like, Pantera.
Nice.
You know, very interesting sonic brew there. You know, the Body Bags from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yes.
Graveyard Boulevard from Salisbury, North Carolina. You know, my buddies in October also from Salisbury. These are the bands that I actually listen to their music. One of my favorite songs right now is a song called Brand New Disease by Savage Remains from Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Yep, I've had Savage Remains on here before. Good guys.
Yeah, they are. And that song, Brand New Disease, makes me want to break shit and fuck on the floor. Like, that is that song. Pain from Maryland. Tim is almost as good a singer as I am. I mean, like close, like absolute close second, you know, and that's saying something because I'm an amazing singer. And if he ever hears this interview, he's probably going to laugh his ass off because like this is the kind of shit that we talk to each other on stage, right? And you want to talk about an amazing performance. The band Pain puts on with an exclamation point. Pain, all capitals with an exclamation point. They put on an intense show. And dude's got an amazing set of vocals on him. He's got a great band backing him up. They have a song, "We'll Have a Hell of a Good Time," one more time. And they like that's kind of like their big closer. That's their rock and roll all night. And so this is the music that I listen to. You know, I don't listen to shit on the radio. Like, no, that's any good. It's all garbage. The best bands out there are the bands that like you need to like dig up stuff on YouTube. You need to be like lurking like the underground music chat boards and Facebook and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I do.
So Carolina Voodoo is not only autobiographical about us, but it's also kind of a tribute to all of those people too.
What helps you keep your mind fresh and open to new stuff? Do you do anything differently to keep your mind on track, to block stuff out? What do you do?
That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't, you know.
He hasn't hit that writer's block yet.
You know, I think I just don't, I try not to get caught up in any one single way of doing things. For a long time, the way that my writing process worked was the lyrics came first and music came second. You know, and a lyric sheet may sit in my spiral notebook for years before, you know, I'm picking around on my acoustic guitar. I mostly practice with an acoustic guitar because it's a lot less forgiving and it's you know, for strengthening my fingers. Practice with an acoustic, I pick up the electric guitar and now I'm like flying at like light speed. You know, it's relatively easy by proxy in my opinion. But, you know, I'll be picking on my acoustic guitar and, you know, it's funny, like the stuff that I play like on my own time is nothing like what I play on stage. You know, so I don't know, messing with a Johnny Cash song, or maybe I'm like listening to some Robert Johnson, which is like old blues music, and I'm just kind of jamming along with a Robert Johnson playlist. And sometimes by messing stuff up, like I'll start going down a rabbit hole like with my own thing, and then this music materializes, and then I'll find something like sometimes lyrics come on their own, and sometimes like you know, I'm like, I have a lyric sheet that's going to go with that perfectly. Sometimes it's like that. My music comes from my dark spots. It's how I work through my shit, and you know, everything from, you know, just like I guess like what any songwriter does, you know, I don't know, girls and mostly girls. You know, so I can take the worst broken heart in the world, put it through the filter of like bad B-movie horror, and then there's a song and it's awesome and people love it. You know, so I am amazed at how people interpret things. There's a song off of there's an electric version of it, full band version of it on Necrophile, and there's an acoustic version of it that a lot of people seem to like on my solo record called Morte de Angelis, or loosely translated Death the Angel or Death of the Angel. And it's not a nice song. You know, it's essentially the person in the song is burning old letters and photographs of like an ex-lover that is like getting cold in a pool of her own blood in his garage, you know, and you know, he's very mournful and he's very sad, but you also kind of sense that he's got some anger about him too. And he felt like that this is what he had to do to stop her from hurting him anymore. And it is not a nice song, you know. Bear in mind, you know, well-adjusted people don't write music like this. But I remember the first time we played it live. The first time we played it live was in South Boston, Virginia. And there were these two girls holding hands, waving their little cigarette lighters in the air, kind of mouthing back the words of the song. And because Necrophile had not been out for very long. And So they come up to me after the show, and they're like in tears, like they have tears streaming down their face because they're so moved by the performance of the song. And I said, that song is like a little bit misogynist, right? It's not a nice song, like we don't care. We love that song. It's like our favorite song. And they didn't interpret it that way.
Right.
I think that they related more to the person singing the song as opposed to the person lying on the floor dead in a pool of her own freezing blood. And you never know how people will interpret things in that regard. And so kind of how this fits into the question of my whole process and keeping an open mind to keep stuff flowing. Sometimes I look at my previous work and I try to see it through the eyes of other people. And how are they looking at this, and how does it make them feel? And sometimes that opens a whole other can of worms, and other stuff comes out. Sometimes it's just sitting down with a collection of H.P. Lovecraft and reading it cover to cover. Mm-hmm. It's not sticking to any one method, just keeping my mind open is kind of how stuff continues to come forth after 13 years. And I also don't force my process. I'm not signed to a label. I'm my own label. Decayed Angel Productions is mine. So I don't have anybody like tapping their toe and tapping their watch for the next release. So when it comes out organically. It comes very much from the heart. It's, me I needed that to like work through something going on in my life. And so what you're getting is me bearing my soul. By the time you get it, it's like there's so much that's been purged out of me to produce that body of work. That's is what it is.
So what can fans expect at a show from the mighty Nightmare Sonata when they come out to see you guys? What are they going to get, man?
A lot of dick and fart jokes and STD humor, and my bass player doesn't smell too pleasant. I would strongly suggest that any listeners out there that find themselves stumbling by accident into a Nightmare Sonata show, do not shake my bass player's hand. I know where he's been, and you don't want to know where he's been. But all joking aside, you're going to get my whole heart every single show. I leave everything on stage, and whether I'm in a pleasant humor and I'm just enjoying the interaction with the audience and enjoying playing with my bandmates and I'm having a great time that way, or I come in a bad mood and this is how I'm working those issues out, is to be behind the microphone and just purging all of the stuff in front of an audience, you're going to get my whole heart every single show. What
made you want to become a musician? What was that spark for you that said that's what I want to do right there?
Yeah, it's a little embarrassing actually.
I've heard some good ones.
My first memory of thinking like this is something awesome and I'd like to do this is I was a young kid rolling around in a skating rink about almost 25 years ago, and this song called Basket Case by a band called Green Day came on the PA.
Yeah, there you go.
And it was the coolest thing I'd ever heard, and it kind of stuck with me. And then I saw the music video for that same song on MTV and thought that is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I want to do that too.
Nice.
And then it just kind of snowballed from there. Getting into Green Day was like doing backwards math. You do the backwards math, and you start to, instead of progressing with pop punk, so instead of going from Green Day to Blink-182 to Sum 41 or whatever other garbage came out after that, I went backwards. So it was like, okay, Green Day to Operation Ivy, and
yeah, there you go.
Bad Religion, and Rancid was a peer of is a peer of Green Day. Okay, now Black Flag and the Sex Pistols, Agnostic Front, the Ramones, the Clash.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that, it's like around 1996, I got exposed to a performer by the name of Marilyn Manson, which scratched an itch that I didn't know that I had. I always liked horror. I mean, I always loved like horror movies and shit growing up. You know, I loved the Universal monster stuff when I was a kid. I still do as an adult. But especially that era of Marilyn Manson, you know, do the backwards math. So Marilyn Manson, Ozzy Osbourne,
yes, sir,
Alice Cooper, you know,
yep.
But also things like Rob Zombie. And so like the two things that I learned the first two songs I learned to play when I was learning to play bass, I started out as a bass player, were in this order, were Stuck With Me by Green Day off of the Insomniac record, and Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath off the Black Sabbath record. God. And so, yeah, like, you know, how in the world are these two things ever going to work together?
Yeah.
So, you know, eventually, you know, I started writing my own songs, and I had and I still have it, this Yamaha keyboard that had like all these different drum loops programmed into it, that you could like change the speed of the loop, and you could do like fills, you know, different rolls and fills and intros and ending sequences. And I was able to use that to start writing music and making like little cassette tape recordings of my songs, and was trying desperately to find people to put together a band with. And someone that I worked with maybe 3 times came along and said, you know, have you heard of the Misfits? And I was like, I've heard of them, but I don't know any of their music. And she said, you need to check this band out because your music is kind of like the Misfits, but darker. And so on complete blind faith, went to a record store, picked up a Misfits CD. And the Misfits became the kind of the linchpin that took all these outlying influences like Typo Negative and Black Sabbath and Green Day and Rancid and Social Distortion and Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson and Alice Cooper. You put that linchpin in there that is the Misfits, and now all of this stuff makes sense.
Yes, sir.
And so, like, I had managed to reinvent the wheel, and then someone shows me, well, yeah, it's a good job reinventing that wheel. This is what a real wheel looks like. It's called the Misfits. And that kind of got me going down the road that eventually became Nightmare Sonata. Nightmare Sonata was originally supposed to be like a death rock project. So punk guitars, punky vocals, but with a lot of like keyboarding and electronic background, you know. For further illustration, please buy my Skeletons from the Closet record. And it was kind of supposed to be like Typo Negative meet Bella Morte from Charlottesville, Virginia, by way of alien sex scenes. So that was the original idea, and it just kind of evolved the way that it has into what it is. So we don't really fit nice and neat into the horror punk genre, at least what is now considered horror punk. We're not horror punk the way that Blitzkid is horror punk.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know,
I miss Blitzkid. I wish they'd come back.
You know, so what we do is more, I feel like it's horror rock. It's like I play punk-inspired rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's kind of got a metal tinge to it. And sometimes it's, you know, got some 90s alternative flavor to it, but dark. Sometimes it's straight up like go fuck yourself punk rock. It's kind of whatever it is. Yeah. But it's not horror punk the same way that something like Blitzkid or Calabrese or something like that is. You know, so it's kind of weird because we were before that wave of horror punk, like before horror punk was like being recognized as a subgenre that was actually proliferating after Misfits Mach 2. Right. I was already kind of doing that, but more like the way that someone like Rob Zombie does it, or the way that someone like Alice Cooper does it, or heaven forbid Wednesday 13th, where, yeah, it's dark and it's scary and it's monsters, but like all of those guys have like a very definitive flavor.
Oh yeah,
that's
sure.
Very much theirs.
Everybody's
very
different.
Unique.
Right.
You know, so we kind of got pigeonholed into horror punk because where else are you going to put us? I'm fine with that. I mean, it's cool, whatever. You know, you can call it whatever you want as long as you like it. You know, I'm good with it. You know, people say weird stuff. They're like, "Hey, man, I hope this doesn't offend you, but you know, I can really hear Mike Ness from Social Distortion's influence in like the way you play your guitar solos." I'm like, "Do you like what you hear?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Then I'm not offended at all. As a matter of fact, I really like Mike Ness, so that's awesome."
Yeah,
you know. Or, man, you kind of got like this weird way of bending the strings, like Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath. That's what you're going for? Absolutely, thumbs up.
well, yeah, sure.
You know, yeah. As long as, I mean, so however you interpret it, I don't care. As long as what you think you hear is good. And even when people have tried to insult me that don't know any better, they're like, "Man, this sounds a lot like the Ramones." You sound a lot like the Ramones. You know, people that don't know any better.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right.
And someone will say, "How do you feel about what he just said to you?" Because, I mean, they meant it as an insult. And I'm like, he just compared me to a band that's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, so no skin off my nose, you know. But it's weird in a lot of these horror punk groups and, like, the threads on Facebook, you know. Well, Nightmare Sonata is not really horror punk because they don't sound like enough like the Misfits, and maybe instead of writing songs about voodoo and stuff, they should write songs about serial killers because that would be more horror punk.
You can't. Oh, okay, folks.
Like, what the fuck ever, man.
Voodoo. Yeah. Oh my God, they have missed the concept of life. Voodoo is right in with horror. You cannot. Oh my God. Where's this dude from? I mean, is he living under a rock?
You know, I mean, the people that say shit like that, you know, like exactly like you said it, like I question their I question their mental health.
Yeah, I mean,
you know, like people don't say shit like, you know, normal people don't say shit like that. You know,
oh geez.
It's like that seems, he's like one of those guys that, like, you know, his shit is like organized alphabetically by color, by date. You know, you drop the box of toothpicks, he knows that only 2 are still in the box.
Right.
You know, so it's like I'm like, okay, whatever. Man.
Yeah,
it's cool. It's cool. You know, if that's how you feel, you know, I'm sorry, I don't sound enough like the Misfits for you.
Well, yeah, right. You do your own thing. You like it. The hell with you if you don't. There's the door.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, I mean, as, you know, some of my mentors have told me, you know, Ben, not everybody's going to like you.
Exactly.
And sometimes when they don't like you, it's a compliment. Sometimes you don't want those fans, you know, so all good. But
for your band locally there, how much support do you guys get from fans and venues and radio play? Has anybody in the 13 years that you've been doing this picked you guys up, gave you some exposure, especially there in your local area?
Locally, not so much. There are promoters here that support us. I feel like there are pockets of punks and metalheads that support us. You know, we've played some good gigs locally, but it has never ceased to blow my mind how little support it seems like we've gotten locally versus abroad, like out of state. I have often felt like that we must be on a blacklist somewhere. Like they purposely ignore us, like in terms of like the local, you know, What's Going On journal and like the local radio stations here. I play in Charleston, West Virginia. It was like the second to the last night of the tour last year. And some guy from a short range radio station turns up at the bar that we're playing at and asks me if I'll walk with him like a block that way to the radio station. He's going to play Voodoo Verse from the Hearse, and he wants to interview me on the radio. You know, I get weird requests to get included in podcast radio in like the UK, like overseas. Mm-hmm. You know, I get things like that. I get people like yourself, but it's never local. You know, and I think that the hows and whys, who knows, maybe it's because I'm an asshole. Maybe it's me. You know, I don't know.
No.
I've always tried to be easy to work with, but then again, you know, if I feel like my product's being threatened, then I can turn into a little bit of a Papa Bear.
We all can.
You know, I've always tried to be very cool and never burn bridges. You know, I have maybe publicly called out a venue twice, you know, over the course of, my career, where I've absolutely just napalmed the bridge because it was that shitty a situation. Maybe twice.
Right.
But on the other hand, I go other places and they roll out the red carpet. It's just kind of weird, So, I mean, be cool to everybody and remember the people that do right by you and that are good to you. And, always keep a smile on your face and be very, very careful what you publish on the internet because it may come back to bite you in the ass.
Very true. Very true. But
I mean, so I don't know if that's it, but I mean, I guess it's not as simple a question as yes or no. It's, I'm kind of at this place where you can't expect anything from anybody. You got to slug it out tooth and nail for every inch of ground that you think that you want to gain playing music. Mm-hmm. You got to white knuckle grip it every day. And there is no rocket ride, overnight train to success. It doesn't exist, So I just kind of rely on my own 2 feet to get me to the places where I want to go.
You mentioned this earlier, and I thought this is really cool about when the fans come and tell you about your music and stuff, but I'm sure you get emails on this too. But Ben, what's it mean to you when you receive an email from a fan or prior to the shows or after the shows? They tell you how much that your music has meant to them, pulled them through a tough time or a bad experience, or just made them to relax the everyday bullshit that we go through. What does that mean for you?
It means I'm doing what I set out to do. I love people. I'm not one of those assholes that says, I fucking hate everybody. No, that's not true. I love people. I want the world to be a better place. And rock and roll is for the people, and rock and roll makes people happy. And if what I'm doing is causing that to happen for another human being, then that's big time, huge encouragement for me.
I'm just going to say I apologize for taking so long to discovering you guys because
but better late than never. I'm glad that you did.
Well, I feel like I was just around the cusp there of every band that I listen to horror wise, and there's a Nightmare Sonata right there. Where the hell you been at?
Here we are. And hopefully, it's that seems to be happening. The encouraging thing is it seems to be happening at a higher and higher frequency as we go on. Every passing year, it's a little bigger and a little better than before.
Well,
here in a couple weeks, I'm getting ready to open for Bobby Seale's Undead, a second Misfits alumni.
Good deal.
In the third state.
Good deal.
That's huge, man.
Yeah. Fucking A. That's awesome.
And so, it's like I said, every year a little bigger, a little better than the year before. It's more people. The trickle is becoming, over time, a bigger trickle, and eventually the trickle becomes a waterfall. But that's that diligence, that's that self-discipline, that's you got to be in it to win it and being willing to weather the storm.
I just got to say, man, and I'll say this right now, I've told everybody that comes on this show, you need anything at all, regardless of what it is. If I can help out, I will do it. Play your tracks today.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
That's not a problem. And how can folks stay in touch with you, buy some merchandise and tour dates, things like that? How can they do that, Ben?
Oh, we got the website, www.nightmaresonata.com. You can find us on Reverb Nation. You can find us on Facebook. There's both the actual Facebook page that you can go and like, and then there's also the Nightmare Sonata Funeral Party Fan Club group that you can subscribe to. It's kind of a little more elite, and I post there personally a lot more, and I'm not a stranger to anybody, so people that want to find me on Facebook, feel free to add, and I'll answer questions and all of that good stuff. I try to be pretty accessible to fans and whatnot. So
before I let you go, good sir, will you care to do a promo for the show?
Absolutely. This is Reverend Benjamin Samedi of Nightmare Sonata, and you are listening to BODS Mayhem Hour.
Everybody stick around. We got some great music coming up, and you only hear these interviews right here on BODS Mayhem Hour and Uber City Radio. Thanks, Ben.
Absolutely.